because I want us to be able to share this video with you as we, as a follow-up to this, so that in case you missed anything, you will be able to watch the video again. Good afternoon. Welcome to this very large group. So far, we're about a third of the registrants, so I imagine folks will be coming in as we go through the afternoon. Again, I'm Ann Copenhaver, co-chair of the National Popular Vote Advocacy Group of the League of Women Voters Orange County. It's my privilege to let you know about the organization of today's Zoom call and about how the Popular Vote Interstate Compact works, which we're going to share in a few moments. We have about 150 callers registered, so there are a few housekeeping things we want to take care of. Please plan to ask your questions in the chat, to keep yourselves muted so that background noise won't disturb the rest of us. And when someone comes in and says, "Hi, do you want a cup of tea?" We'll not have to hear that. Just to let you know, again, it is recorded. We plan to send the recording to you and everyone who is registered. Of course, we would love for you to follow the progress of the National Popular Vote movement by joining us at Floridians for NPV, and I will put that information, our website information, in the chat for you shortly. Now let me introduce our presenter briefly. Suzanne Low is District Chair of Floridians for National Popular Vote and the National Popular Vote Chair of the League of Women Voters of Collier County. She has served in Southwest Florida since 1997 as Director of Florida Operations and Financial Advisor for an independent wealth management firm until her retirement in 2016. Before moving to Florida, she worked as an attorney for 16 years in New Jersey. She has a BA with distinction from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, an MA from Indiana University, and her JD from Rutgers School of Law. Her community involvement and leadership has included President of the Estate Planning Council of Naples, President of the Financial Planning Association of Southwest Florida, and charter class member of Leadership Bonita. She served as a board member in a number of local organizations: PACE at Immokalee, the Speakers Assembly of Southwest Florida, the League of Women Voters of Collier County, and Temple Shalom of Naples. Suzanne speaks about the National Popular Vote to civic, leadership, and adult education and community groups across Florida. Suzanne, we're eager to hear your information about the National Popular Vote, about the Interstate Compact, which enacts it, and the status of the National Popular Vote at the moment. I'm going to mute myself and listen as I always learn something from you.
Great, thank you, Ann. I am going to share my screen. We've tried this before, it should work. We'll get the slideshow from the beginning. Okay, hopefully, Ann, everybody sees the slideshow. Okay, I've got this little thing up here. How do I stop this? Okay, so we're going to talk today. First of all, I'm thrilled to see such a good group of people, a nice size group around the state of Florida. I've been giving these presentations with updates, of course, since 2019. And usually I get to, pre-COVID, I gave them to smaller groups, and then Zoom changed all of our lives, and I've been giving this to bigger groups. But this is one of the larger ones, and it does give, the Zoom does give us an opportunity to have a wider audience. So we're going to try to decipher the National Popular Vote. I realize some of you probably know a fair amount about the National Popular Vote. I know some of you, some of your names. Some of you may have just heard of it, and most of you are probably somewhere in between. So I'm going to try to explain things as clearly as I can. and I'm going to ask that you let me speak. It's going to be about 25 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time the rest of the hour for whatever comments and questions you have. But we find that if we get waylaid by one person's concerns, a lot of times those things get answered later in the presentation, and that way everybody has a chance to get a basic understanding. So we're going to start. Anne, are you going to do this little survey? Or are we going to just do it? I'll just ask.
Yes, just
in the chat.
I will monitor hands raised.
Okay, so if you believe that every citizen's vote for President of the United States should count equally, please raise your hand. I'll let Anne comment on that. Except I can't see you, Anne, so you're going to have to.
Right. Exactly. I will. I'm at the point where I'm almost through. For most, if you just raise your hand, the hand will go up. And
in the
even if I can't see you, I would say we have a significant majority. I can't see everybody's hand yet, but we have a significant majority.
Okay. So that's what the national popular vote is all about, and we'll go into that in considerable detail. So what will the national popular vote do? First of all, it will guarantee the presidency to the candidate who receives the most votes throughout all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Every vote will count equally regardless of where the voter lives. Every vote in every state will matter in every presidential election. As you'll see, that's not our current system. So I am trying to, how do I get rid of, Anne, how do I get rid of, it's interrupting my vision, the little screen up here. Okay, well, I guess I can work around it. So how do we elect our president now? Well, I'm sure everyone on this call knows that it is the Electoral College. We have, every state has a certain number of electors, and we'll talk about how that's done. And there are 538 electors in the entire country, which means you need a majority, 50% plus one, which is 270 electoral votes in order to become president. Once you have 270, that's the end of the story, or it should be. And why do we have an electoral college? Because it's in the Constitution. Each state, this is Article 2, Section 1, says, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in Congress. That means that even the smallest states have, smallest in the sense of population, have three electors. And that's because even the smallest ones have one representative, and every state has 2 senators. So the founding fathers, in creating the Electoral College, thought it would be a deliberative body, and that's why they called it a college. However, even before 1800, the presidential electors pretty much became a rubber stamp for their party's candidates. And the electoral system as we know it changed pretty much throughout the 1800s as political parties strengthened and each state's ruling party determined that they weren't going to give any of the state's electoral votes to their minority party. So what is the other big piece of this is that we have statewide winner-take-all laws in 48 of the 50 states. That is where the problem lies, really, because let's say in Florida, this map is slightly out of date. I just realized, because Florida has 30 electors. So this was this particular map. Well, it says 2020 actual, but as a result of the census, that's changed a little bit. So in Florida, for example, and all of the winner-take-all states are like this. You have, let's say we have 10 million people who show up, there are registered to vote and they show up and vote for president. Well, if 5,000,001 vote for candidate A and 4,999,000 vote for candidate B, only candidate A gets any electoral votes, and they get all of them. So you can have a difference of 1 or 2 votes, electoral votes, and state by state, that is how you come up with the total electoral college votes. The result of that is that 5 of our 47 presidents, which is over 10% of them, lost the popular vote and still became president. 3 of them, as you can see here, John Quincy Adams, Rutherford B. Hayes, Benjamin Harris, that were in the 1800s. And 2 were since we've reached 2000, as you know. So what happens, first of all, in terms of campaigning? So this is the 2016 general election campaign events. Florida was then considered a swing state, battleground state. We'll talk about that a little more. And you can see, actually, Florida had more campaign events than any other state. And you can see the big numbers here. A few states had them. A few states had less. And you see there's some that had nothing, or 1 or 2 or 3, or no events. So why is that significant? It's significant because it means that the candidates are only paying attention to the concerns of the people who live in those states. And that holds for both parties and actually all parties, that they really have no incentive to talk to the concerns of the other states. In 2020, that actually got even worse in some ways. I mean, more states had a few, but you had 96% of the presidential campaign events, which means where they are listening to voters and speaking to them, were in, see, I can't read my own number here because of that. 96% of the campaign events were in these few states. And the expectation is that 41 states, this is driving me crazy. I know you can't see what I'm seeing, but I'm seeing all that stuff you usually have at the bottom is sitting, I don't know how to get rid of it. Oh, well, I'm afraid to hit that or I might get thrown off the air here. So 41 states, which represent 80% of the population of the United States, are expected to be ignored in the 2024 next year's presidential election. I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty awful. And what are some of the long-term implications for this? Well, the swing states tend to receive more grants, which means federal dollars, than the others. For example, California, which is considered and has been for a while a reliably blue state, got little federal help, although, as you may remember, they had terrible fires in 2020. Texas, a reliably red state for some time, has also got very few dollars for its horrific hurricanes the same year. So neither, reliably blue nor red, considered the spectator states, the opposite of a swing state, battleground state. Swing and battleground are the same. Spectator are the rest. They're called spectator states because they don't have very much to say about who's president. And so a lot of us have concluded that having a president who's elected by a minority of voters isn't good for the country as a whole or long term. So the problem is not really the Electoral College, it's the state winner-take-all laws. Now, remember, the states, how the states vote in the Electoral College is up to each state's legislature. So the way these were passed, as I said, pretty much in the 1800s, these were state laws, and laws can be changed by the legislature in each state. So the winner-take-all provisions that are now in 48 states can be changed or repealed just the same way they were enacted by the legislature. And they can enact the national popular vote. And we'll see how they do it, how they can do it, how they are doing it. So how should we elect the president? Well, I think most Americans and most of the people on this call believe that it should be one person, one vote. And this was one of the things that attracted me to this topic a few years ago. It just seemed not only logical, but fair. As many of you, I've moved around quite a bit, especially in my younger life. And I was thinking that my vote should be the same wherever I live. It shouldn't matter if I'm voting in the state of Ohio, where I was born, the state of Wisconsin, where I turned 21, which is what you had to be when I first got a chance to vote for president, state of Indiana, where I went to graduate school, state of New Jersey, where I went to law school and practiced law, lived for 19 years, or the state of Florida, where I've lived and worked since 1997. My vote for president of the United States, the one office, that represents all of us, should count the same as everyone else's. So I like this map because this is the reality. Just because you live in a state that's red or blue doesn't mean that's who you are. We're really a purple country. Some people live in a state where they're a minority and some were a majority. Those things change. When I moved to Florida, I think there was a Democratic governor. I didn't pay much attention at the time because I was trying to settle into, a new job and a new life. That changes. Texas, I remember, can't remember her name right now, but the woman governor was a Democrat. So things change in both directions. So what is the National Popular Vote, Interstate Compact, and why am I adding those two words at the end? And that's because, that's actually what the National Popular Vote law is. It's an agreement, interstate compact. Compact simply means agreement. It's a little older term, but it is legally the term that's used. Interstate, among or between states. And the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact states and guarantees that the U.S. presidency would go to the candidate who receives the most popular votes in all 50 states and the District of Columbia combined. Now, I'm repeating some things because it's important that there's a lot of detail to this. It combines a lot of different concepts. So I want to make sure everybody understands it. It's not that I don't know, I've said it. So this law replaces the state winner-take-all laws. But it only comes into effect when the states that total 270 electoral votes, which is the number needed to elect a president, have enacted the law. And it works with the Electoral College. It doesn't replace it. And we'll see how all these things that I've just, stated, how it all works. So the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is constitutionally conservative, as conservatives who support it will tell you, and that's why they support it. Why? Because it doesn't alter the Constitution. It doesn't violate the Constitution. It retains the Electoral College, which is provided for in the Constitution. It retains state control of elections, which is also provided in the Constitution. It's approved by the participating states, by their legislatures. in the same way that any other law, state law in their state has to be approved. For those of you who are interested, we're doing this for the Florida League of Women Voters. It has been a priority of both the U.S. and Florida League for some time. And it's a Floridians for National Popular Vote goal for 2024. Now, do I or any of us really think it's going to happen in 2024? No, I mean, I put this goal down a while ago, but we are much further along than you might suspect, and that is the other reason I got involved with this. It is not pie in the sky, and I'm not sure if the next, yeah, here we go. So again, the interstate compact, it instructs the electors in the states which pass the law to vote for the presidential candidate who captures the most votes in the entire United States rather than in their state. So where are we now? Well, this law has been signed into law so it's been passed by legislatures and signed by the governors of both parties in 17 jurisdictions, which represent 205 of the 270 electoral votes necessary to implement the legislation. So it's 76% of the way there. And when I started with this, I think we were about 68%. So we are making progress. It is, as they say, a marathon and not a sprint. And again, it will go into effect when states with 270 electoral votes have been committed to the compact. So we only need 65 more votes. That can be a bunch of little states that have 3 and 4 and so on. It can be some big states. I don't think Florida is going to be one of the next, but there are some I mean, if we were, though, that's 30 right there. So it can be any combination. And let's look at, so this is where it is right now. I don't want to go in any detail. The green are states that have passed it, orange, at least one legislative chamber, and the gray, which includes our state, has at least had the bill introduced, but no hearing yet. We're hoping that will happen soon, and I'll tell you about exactly what's happening in Florida. So in Florida, what's the status right now? Well, the legislature is planning their 2024 session right now. And there are 2024 session bills for the national popular vote that have been filed in the Florida legislature in both what do they call it? The House and the Senate. So Representative Michael Gottlieb, who's a Democrat, has filed the law, and it's been given the number of HB, standing for House Bill 67, and Senator Victor Torres has filed it in the Senate Bill SB, that is 236. And they've been filed in Florida every year since 2017 in both House of Representatives and Senate. And there's a Senator Anthony C. Hill Sr. introduced it in the Senate for the very first time in 2011. We have others that have co-sponsored, others representatives and senators. Unfortunately, no Republicans have done so to date, but we are ever hopeful. And one of the things our organization is doing is trying to lobby the legislators and educate them, because some of them know a lot about it, and some of them know almost nothing, or they think they know something, and it turns out they're wrong. Okay, so what's happening next right now? What's likely to happen? The most likely next state to pass national popular vote is Michigan. They have 15 electoral votes, but there's some procedural hurdles which seem to be delaying that. In Maine and Alaska, which are smaller, 4 and 3 electoral votes respectively, They have significant legislative support, but lengthy processes, so that's not going to happen overnight. And other near future possibles are, and that may not be the most grammatical way to say it, but you know what I mean. Other possibilities of states that may happen in the near future are Pennsylvania, which has 19 electoral votes, Arizona with 11, Virginia 13, Nevada 6, and Wisconsin 10. If all of these did it, we'd be way over. And those numbers, yeah, are electoral votes. Okay, now there are lots of myths and misconceptions about the national popular vote. And I am just going to go through 7 that I think are among the most important. And as I'm going to do this, I'm going to hold up this book. You see this book? I mean, I don't expect you to study. This is a big book. This is called Every Vote Equal. It's heavy too. It has been created by nationalpopularvote.com. And you can either get this at a very reasonable cost, I mean, just a few dollars, or better yet, for those of you who are trying to save trees, you can go online and all of this information is there. And I'm sure Anne will give it to you, and I have a slide also with that. So these important myths and misconceptions are, first of all, that only a constitutional amendment can change how we elect the president, that this would require congressional approval. Another myth is that if we have national popular vote, big cities will control the election. Small states would lose any advantage that they get from the Electoral College. Another myth, Democrats are only doing this because of the 2016 election. One that you hear a lot is that the founding fathers created the system because it was the most fair and we shouldn't change it. Or a state could leave the compact during election, causing chaos. So let's go through these one by one. So it is constitutional to have a national popular vote law. Why? Again, the Constitution gives the power to the legislatures of each state. The legislatures decide right now, and will continue to do it, how to apportion their state's electoral votes. And the Supreme Court has determined that, has termed, this power plenary, which means absolute power. There is no federal power in this regard. So it's a state-by-state decision that doesn't require a constitutional amendment. We're not talking about if you abolish the Electoral College, then that does, but that's not what we're talking about. With this, the National Popular Vote law works with the Electoral College. It counts electoral votes, but it counts them based on the entire country instead of state by state. And the congressional consent, as I alluded in the last slide, it's only necessary for interstate compacts that, quote, encroach upon or interfere with the supremacy of the United States. That's a Supreme Court case in 1978. But since, as we saw above, the choice of the method of appointing presidential electors is an exclusive and plenary state power, there's no encroachment on federal authority. Okay, are there partisan motives in this whole movement? Well, the National Popular Vote movement started in 2006. Maryland was the first state to join in 2007. Both red and blue states have enacted the National Popular Vote, and many prominent Republicans and Democrats have signed on to NPV. It isn't a left or right issue. It's an American issue. Of course, these days that's hard to say about anything, but that's the reality. Okay, are there partisan results from, would there be from the National Popular Vote law? Well, nationwide voting for president isn't inherently advantageous to either party because politically, as we know, the U.S. is divided country, and it's a pretty evenly divided country. And usually the candidate who's best aligned with the views and values of the country's voters, generally that's the winner of the national popular vote. And there's a new Pew Research poll this year, just came out not that long ago, showed that 65% of Americans favored the idea of a national popular vote. The Republicans and Republican-leaning independents favored it by 54%, Democrats by a whopping 82%. And interestingly, Americans under age 50 support it by 69%. And these are our current and future voters. An earlier poll, this was in 2017, but this was just in Florida, when Floridians were asked how they thought the country should elect the president, 68% of Floridians said it should be the candidate who gets the most votes in all 50 states, and 32% said the current electoral college system, which means the winner take all. And historically, the Republican Party, despite some of these numbers, has fared well in terms of the national popular vote. 9 Republicans won more than 53%, and only 2 Democrats have done that. Now, what about the conservative case for the national popular vote? We have I've heard several of these people talk, and they've written, and there's a YouTube presentation by a couple. So let's just look at a few of the conservatives, self-styled and recognized, who are supporting the national popular vote. Rick Tyler worked on Ted Cruz's 2016 presidential campaign, and he points out that a larger proportion of people, including new younger voters, vote in battleground states than in states that are considered safely blue or red. In other words, people vote for when they think it matters, and they're not inclined to bother to vote if they don't think it matters. That's human nature about almost everything that we do. If people don't think that their voice counts, they just don't exert their voice. Saul Anuzis, who's a former chairman of the Republican National Committee and also of the Michigan Republican Party, pointed out that a president not elected by the majority lacks a mandate to act on the goals that he or she campaigned on. That's one of the reasons he's for the national popular vote. Michael Steele, who's a former Republican national chairman, and then although also some other Republican leaders, argue that the national popular vote is the conservative way to change the winner-take-all laws, change laws with other laws, rather than changing the Constitution. And if you're interested, you can Google, there's a YouTube presentation by Rick Tyler and Saul Anuzis, which is kind of enlightening if you're interested in that. So how about the myth that big cities will control elections if the national popular vote is enacted? So this is from our most recent census in 2020. The population of the 100 biggest cities in the United States is just under 65 million, which is 19.6% of the American population. Population of rural America is 66 plus million, which is 20%. So very, very close. The national popular vote would make every vote equal regardless of whether you live in the city, in a rural area, or of course the suburbs or small towns. Where does the US population live? I thought this was important because this is people who are opposed to national popular vote often come up with the view that the cities will dominate. So if you take the 5 biggest cities in the United States, I think you may be surprised to know that that's only 6% of the US population. If you take the 20th biggest cities, it's still only 10%. The 50 biggest cities is 15%, and the 100 biggest cities is 20% of the US population. I think they said the 100th is Spokane, Washington, which is the capital of the state of Washington, where my sister lives in that state. And that city, which is the 100th, I believe, is just over 200,000 people. So the cities are not the only place where the action is. 85% of the US population live in places with a population of less than 360,000 people. 20% live in cities, 20% in rural areas, remainder in suburbs and small towns. How about small states? Do they really benefit from the current system? Actually, they're the most disadvantaged because federal resources tend to go to swing states. They're ignored under the current state-by-state winner-take-all system. Basically, they don't have a lot of votes, and also they're not swing states. So power comes right under our current system from being a closely divided battleground state and nowhere else. How about the misconception that the founders decided on this way of electing the president and we shouldn't mess with what our brilliant founders decided? Well, the reality is that the framers of the Constitution took 30 votes over a period of 22 days to determine how the president should be elected. None of those votes dealt with the topic of winner take all. So here you've got the Constitution leaves it up to the states to decide how electors are awarded. So this is a fairly famous picture, painting of the founders, all male, of course, very white, all landowners, dressed up as people did in that era. They're in Philadelphia in the summer. It's sweltering hot. It happened to have been an extremely hot summer. Of course, there was no air conditioning. They're voting on this over and over and just decided, enough. Let's just let the states decide. And, I'm sure you've been many of you in meetings of various organizations where that's what happens. You can't agree and you let somebody else make the decision. That's really how it happened. How about chaos coming from withdrawing from the compact during an election? Well, the law itself states that states can't withdraw from the compact between July 20th of a presidential election year and the inauguration on January 20th of the following year. And that's enforceable by the Constitution, what's called the Impairments Clause, which has always worked, has been enforced by states that are trying to get out of compacts. And by the way, I didn't say, there are lots of interstate compacts that exist. A lot of them have to do with water rights, with certain rights that exist because of the geography, because they're of neighboring states and so on. So League of Women Voters, for those of you who are members, might be interested that the League has favored that this is the National League, supports the use of the National Popular Vote Compact as one acceptable way to achieve the goal of the direct popular vote for election of the president. And this says until the abolition of the Electoral College is accomplished, it wouldn't be necessary to have it abolished. But the other thing is realistically, certainly in this environment, that's not going to happen. You need, I believe it's 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of the states have to approve any constitutional amendment. And I personally, and I think most of the members of the organization, don't believe that's going to happen. So just about done. Okay, so our organization, I don't have too much more to say. This was created in 2018 by the Florida League, and we have several partners in this, and Anne talked about well, she didn't actually. In addition to the role she described, she's actually steering committee. She's either a member or the liaison, but she'll tell us. She might. And we have 20 district chairs, about 20 throughout the state of Florida. We've got a lot of team and other volunteers, and have a national popular vote mailing list of 1,600. And I am going to take questions, but Anne, after that, let me just point this out. There is more information, but both on the Floridians for NPV website and a nationalpopularvote.com. If you go to the Floridians, that also has a link to the National Popular Vote. And believe me, you will get all the information you could possibly want there. And then if you're interested, and I stole this and some other slides from Dan Lashansky, who's better at the tech. Well, I'm not good at the technology, but anyway, what else can we do? You can send an email to your legislators, sign up to receive our newsletter, get involved, become a member, schedule a speaker. We're happy to provide a speaker if you have a venue. It can be a church group, or synagogue. It can be a homeowners association, any group that you belong to where you'd like to have a speaker. We're all over the state. And you can just talk to your friends about it. So any questions? And Anne, I guess you're going to get rid of this, or should I just stop the share? I guess I'll just stop share.
Yeah.
Okay.
Share.
All righty.
And
so
now I would like for you to put and Frank, you've asked a question. Can you provide us with your email, street address, and telephone number? Are you speaking to Suzanne? And if you are, I would say that's her choice to be able to do that. What I have provided is the URL so that you can get to the website for Floridians for National Popular Vote, which will enable you to make connections. It will also enable you to request a speaker. You can do so here. I will save the chat and we will get back to you, because I do have your email address if you're registered here, and I will be able to get back to you with any information. But your league can schedule a Zoom meeting or a meeting in person. We have folks kind of scattered all over, and we will travel to be able to give. That we have a variety of folks who are willing to give those kinds of presentations to your groups. And Susan Adams said is contacting legislators is something we can do almost every day. At least we have committee referrals this year for NPV. And yes, we do. They have been referred to committees. Every year they've been referred. They've just not been heard yet. And before we go too much further, let me go back to an initial question that Frank asked for you, Suzanne. How about here in Florida using the Citizens Initiative process to put this issue on the 2026 general election ballot?
Well, it's not a bad idea, but doing that petition process is very involved. It takes a lot of work. And since it requires the whole system is interstate compact that has to be passed by the legislature, I would think that if you're interested in the issue, you're much better served to spend your time and efforts at convincing the legislators. Because even in the 26 years I've lived in Florida, I remember being shocked when I first realized that even when there are constitutional amendments passed by the electorate, in other words, there are enough votes, the legislature ignores them. They just don't care. And so although it's good publicity, I don't think for this issue it's the way to go. If you're interested in the issue, we got to get our legislators to pass it. And the committees, if you're if the legislators that are on the committee that will hear this, if we can get enough, are very, very important. Your own legislator, the one that represents your area, has to listen to you. So if you call them up and say, look, I know you're not on this committee, but I would really like you to consider this seriously, consider co-sponsoring. I'd love to come in and talk to you about this, or have someone do it. That's much better. And we do, as an organization, we are lobbying the legislators all the time. And we've made some good contacts. I think Anne can tell you better than I that there have been they're having sessions, I think starting at least last year, where the legislators who are sponsoring have like weekly luncheons, not weekly luncheons, but just like we have lunch and learn, they have a lunch and learn, and interested people can come and hear. And I know they've had some of those, and they can listen to what's going on with national popular vote and really learn about it, because a lot of people, even some people that are for it, don't really understand it. And if you read articles, sometimes it says the national popular vote gets rid of the electoral college. And as I've tried to explain it in depth today, it does not. It works with it. So that was a long answer, but I hope I answered a few different things with that. Thank you for the question.
Yeah. And I think, Frank, I could add one thing. It's very, very expensive to do that. We are finding out that really, and we don't have $1 million. What we do have is folks that show up, that want to know more. If everyone on this call made it their business to get to their representative and their senator, and really, frankly, you're going to get to the legislative aides of those folks and say, hey, I want you to know more about this because I think this is really important. One of the reasons why we are doing legislative education, even though there's not a snowball's chance in a Florida summer that this is going to pass in the 2024 legislative session in Florida. So why bother? Because it will happen. The national, as we say, we're 76% of the way there. Yes, it's taken a long time, and it may take until 2027 rather than 2024. It may take until 2027, but this is a movement that's going to happen, and we ought to know about it, and legislators ought not to be surprised. Florida will become irrelevant if they're not part of the picture. And every time you say that to a legislator, that Florida will become irrelevant unless you make a decision here, that matters, and folks respond. So, other questions? I'm not seeing very many questions in the chat, and I would love to see more.
So I see here, Anne Sue Bookbinder has her hand raised.
Yes, Sue, put your question in the chat, please, so that I can translate that. As you can well imagine, we can't have a chat with 74 people. So that's the reason why we're going about this because people talk over one another. All of us are so excited and so passionate. You wouldn't be on this call if you didn't have a great interest, and we want to respond to that. But Sue, can you put it in the chat?
You'd have to, well, I think she has a problem with writing. I'm not sure. I'm sure I know Sue well, and she would have a worthwhile question, so I maybe make an exception. Anne, you're muted.
I'm going to see if I can find her on the screens. And
let's see. I am let me
try mute her.
No, I can only ask to unmute her. Okay.
Well, I have a question in the two questions now in the chat. What does happen to the states that do not join? Does it affect their voters? The answer, well, I can answer that one quickly. Yeah. The answer is no.
Except that it makes their voters, all of us, let's say that there are 270 that they pass, it goes into effect. Florida's not one of them. It makes, well, our votes are counted in that total, but our electors don't count in that. So it's, we would still, every state's voters will count when that happens, but their legislatures become irrelevant. Yeah. The electoral votes in effect of those states become irrelevant, but the voters' voices, I'm making that more confusing than it probably needs to be. But
well, right now, as let me give this a try. Right now, it takes 270 of the 538 votes to elect a president. And Suzanne said this, once you get to 270, the rest don't matter because it takes 270, you've got 270. It's in that sense that everybody who isn't in the 270, quote, it doesn't matter how they voted. But because we're saying the 270 will choose, those electors will be chosen, and as Margie Rohrbach said, if this were to pass, they wouldn't be able to determine who would win the election until after all the votes in the country.
Yeah, exactly, which is the way it should be.
Yeah.
Instead of having those poor people on the West Coast say, I've just heard it on, it's 3 hours earlier. They haven't even gotten a chance to go to the polls. And they say, why should I go vote? It's been decided. That wouldn't happen. And I think that's a good thing.
And also, but I would regret not being able to stay up all night on election night and listen to the polls being called. That would not be relevant.
Well, I think they wouldn't be counting it in the same way, but there's still, the votes have to come in. It's just that it wouldn't be a horse race state by state, which it is now.
And before I get to to Susan McLeod's question, let me ask everybody to look in the chat at what Frank Mora has written. He's talking about the Digital Democracy Project, which I participate in. And if you were at the convention in June, the Digital Democracy Project was there, and you would have a chance to learn how to do that. Please, Frank, do share their contact information, because although it is a way for you to express your opinion, it does not go directly to the state representatives and the state senators, but in terms of something that they're paying attention to at this point. However, I think it is an important effort, and one that we ought to watch very closely, because it could be something that's very important. So Frank, would you put that in the chat? And Susan McLeod asked, what Republican governors have signed to date? The only one that I know of is in Colorado, but.
Well, Larry Hogan signed it when he was governor of, what was it, Maryland?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so that's, but I haven't kept track of exactly. I just know it's been both parties.
Yes, it has been both parties, but it has been overwhelmingly Democrat
Yes.
that have signed it. You're absolutely right. And Dan Lashansky has answered Linda Donaldson's question, which was, if you can help a 2023 convention, where can I find the national narrated video that opened the workshop that was at the League of Women Voters of Florida convention last June? And Dan has referenced that. There is a 2-minute video at Floridians for National Popular Vote, and Robert Wright has done several on National Popular Vote on YouTube. If you do a search on YouTube for National Popular Vote, you will find some wonderful resources that are short. Some of them, they don't give you as much information as Suzanne has shared, very frankly, but it's absolutely terrific. Absolutely terrific. I think, Frank, I haven't seen your reference to the Digital Democracy Project yet. So I will leave the chat open, and I will leave this open a few more minutes to get a last possible question. But it is 5:59 right now, and therefore we have had 1 hour of your time. I really want to appreciate everyone here who has taken the time to be a part. Your interest is huge. And I think it is a measure of which I'm pretty proud that we are still at 57 folks who've stayed with us for an hour. That's an awfully long commitment for you to make. I would reiterate, please go to the website or put in the chat whether you might like a presentation, a Zoom presentation or an in-person presentation on it for your league, for your organizations, whatever, the Rotary Club, chamber groups. Please, indeed, go to our website and let us know, because it's perfectly possible you can tell us exactly where you are. We have passion, will travel. Thank you so much. We certainly appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks all for your attention.
And thank you, Karen Wenzel, who is going to contact her reps.
Great. Okay.
And Frank has put the number for Digital Project in the chat.
Yeah, he's given us, or some people have, yeah, you have an email address and a phone number, and I'm happy to give you my email address. But in this crazy world, I don't know about anything else. And I don't answer, here, let's see. I don't answer the phone when I prefer, if we contact by email, there's my email address. Hopefully I spelled it wrong. Okay. Be happy to take any email questions. Okay. Thanks a lot.
So I can,
yes.
Yeah, okay.
I have a problem with my fingers. You don't want to know all the medical reasons, but I can't type. So I can't type my one question, but maybe I can conceptualize it. Every time I'm on an opposite side of you with whoever in this town, which happens a lot, I need to understand where they're coming from. so I can present my position. I don't understand the other side. Why would somebody be against this? That's my question.
Okay, I think I can answer that question. I don't see Suzanne still on, but I think I can answer that question for you only because I've asked that question of a chief lobbyist who identifies as a conservative Republican. And what he says is there are two reasons why people do not support the national popular vote. One is they don't believe that their issues are winning issues. They believe that if they put the issues to a national vote, they would lose. The other is they don't believe in the efficacy, they don't believe in the American voters. They don't trust the American voters to actually support popular and good for the good of all.
They say that not ashamedly. They actually say that.
No,
knowing
he actually says that as a lobbyist. He actually says that. If you believe that the American voters, and this is Ann's terminal, if you believe that the American voters have good sense, and if you believe that they are looking out for, they want the best for the country, and if you believe that they want, what they really want is policies and therefore laws that can do the most for the American people, then you couldn't possibly be against it.
That's correct.
And so what I'm saying to you comes from a conservative Republican lobbyist who says to Republican folks, we can't
trust them.
Yeah, you can't touch that. I mean, that's
oh my God.
There you go.
Well, thank you for that information, because then I'll know exactly how I can combat it, but I don't know how to combat it.
Well, and to say, because if you believe in the voters and if you have the best policies, then there isn't any reason why you would be afraid of the national popular vote. So that people who verbalize will say things like Republicans would never win if there was a national popular vote. We know that's not true because there are states where Republicans actually win. We know it's not true. And we know that not everybody's take on every single issue is going to be the same. We're always going to disagree. Well, for heaven's sake, I don't care. In a family, folks can disagree. But overall, you have to take you take the big picture.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Then I'm going to say thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and I hope that you will contact your legislators, or more importantly, go out to educate yourself further on the Floridians for NPV site and make a request for us to present to your league personally, to your group personally. Within the Orange County League, we have to do it by small groups because all 700 of us don't get together at the same time. So we choose smaller groups, Young Leaguers in Action, the Voter Services, those kinds, government committee. We can do a Zoom for anybody, anywhere. We'll work with you to schedule that. So thank you again. I'm going to sign off.